This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello, welcome back once again to North Pod, and I got a couple of things lined up for this episode. We're going to start off having a look at the Syd Barker Medal, which was held on Saturday evening. And we're also going to take a look at the Round 3 AFLW game, which was much better than last week. Took us a quarter to take control, but after that first quarter, it was a landslide for the most part. So we will talk about that in the second part of the episode. We're going to start with the Syd Barker. And it was a challenging night on Saturday night, trying to follow the count and also watching a fantastic semi-final between the Giants and the Lions where, I mean, let's be honest, the Giants blew it. Two weeks in a row, they've had shocking losses where they've got out to significant leads and then blown it. I really thought that the Giants were, were the real deal this year, but they've choked, unfortunately. So yeah, watching that match as well as trying to keep up on the Syd Barker medal count it was interesting viewing for a Saturday night, that's for sure. I thought probably a good place to start would just be, I guess, talking about the voting system, which was something that I do look it up every year around this time and then promptly forget it. So there's 5 coaches that vote, and they give a 4-3-2-1, with 1 vote meaning that a player has played their role and 4 votes being they've had a standout best on ground performance. So my understanding, therefore, is that you can give a 4, a 3, or a 2, or a 1 to as many players as you deem necessary. And then obviously 4 times 5, the maximum a player can have is 20 votes per game. So I don't think looking at the votes coming in on Saturday night, there weren't too many of super high voting games. And yeah, I mean, I guess a really good game or a solid game for a player might not net them, 16, 17, 18 votes potentially, but I get the sense that you couldn't, or certainly the way the votes were going, I think only 1 player was maybe getting a 4, but there might have been lots of players that got 2s and 1s from coaches. So that's the voting system, and that's how they end up with quite a lot of votes at the end of the day. I guess, if you're listening to this, you've probably already caught up with it, but it was a Luke Davies-Uniacke win. He finished on 242 votes, just ahead of Tristan Xerri, Big X, on 229. And the Big Shee's 212 votes was in third place. And then Daylight, as we kind of expected. That those were the standout 3 across the season. All 3 of them had absolutely fantastic seasons. And then behind them was, a bunch of, inconsistent players or younger players or players that are maybe playing their role but don't necessarily get as much of the limelight. But we know that those 3 players were certainly the best for the season. Next best, for what it's worth, Paul Curtis was in 4, so a great way to round out the year for Paul Curtis. 140, so he's 72 votes behind Harry Sheezel in third, and Tommy Powell was 139, so only 1 behind Paul Curtis. But there's your top 5, LDU, Xerri, Sheezel, Curtis, Tommy Powell. And then after that, Zerha, Comben, Core, McDonald, Jackson Archer rounds out the top 10. So probably a couple of talking points from that. And just, I guess, for reference, Jackson Archer had 115 votes. So, you double that and you're still only in second place. LDU was well out ahead of those other players in the middle part of the pack. I think, McDonald and Archer hitting the top 10 are both interesting for different reasons. Archer finished 10th and was only 1 vote ahead of the next 2, which was Larkey and Darcy Tucker. So, you take that for what it is. But he really played half a season or just over half a season. So for him to finish in 10th, in one part shows how fantastically well he played in that time. We know that he got absolutely torched by Bobby Hill, but every other game I thought he was, solid to fantastic. So, a great effort from him to get in 10th, but also, probably doesn't reflect well on some other players that were finishing below him that played the full year. And Luke McDonald in 9th is an interesting one. I know that'll be something that some fans would scoff at potentially. But, whilst I don't think he would have been getting too many of the threes and fours, I've got no doubt that he would have been getting ones for playing his role pretty consistently, and potentially some twos and maybe even some threes. But, he played every game bar one. He was never the sort of having a flashy role, and I didn't give him any votes in the North Podium. But by the same token, I thought he had a really consistent year, and ninth is a great result for him given the role he's playing, what he's being asked to do, and how he played last year. Last year, I don't think he had a great year, and there aren't too many people that thought he had a good year last year, but I thought he was solid without being remarkable this year. So they're probably the two interesting ones that were in the top 10 or that people kind of raised eyebrows about. I think Aiden Core probably potentially is a little unlucky to be as low as he is, but also, it's tough work being a defender. Certainly some interesting omissions from that top 10. So for what it's worth, everyone that played a game except for Tyler Sellers and Cal Coleman-Jones got votes. So Sellers only played the 2 games. Coleman-Jones only played the 3, and one of those he hurt his Achilles and then didn't play. So I guess from that you can say that everyone was getting a little bit. There's even Josh Goda, who did his Achilles in the first game, had the 3 votes. Miller Bergman 3, Will Dawson 6, Riley Hardiman 7, Hugh Greenwood 7. So right down the bottom of the leaderboard there are players getting votes, for playing their role in a game or two. And I guess that's what makes the Syd Barker a little bit different from something like a Brownlow or even, the way that I voted the North Podium, where it is just the 4 best players, and oftentimes players playing their roles don't necessarily get a chance to score votes, in a best on ground kind of scenario. So it was just those 2, Sellers and CCJ, that didn't get any votes. For me, there are probably 2. I mean, you could go through quite a few, but there was probably 2 that missed out on the podium. So thinking about my own award again, there were 2 that were a long way down the voting that I think probably speaks to the seasons that they had and how disappointing they were for different reasons. Dill Stevens is one that stands out, freshly traded in on a long-term contract. We know that, there's a reason that he wasn't getting a game at Sydney, but I think when you trade a player like that, and you always want to think that, they're either going to turn it around or potentially they've just lacked opportunity at their old club. But Dylan Stevens to finish on 25th with 29 votes is, very disappointing. There'd be players that racked up 29 votes across 2 games. And he didn't play the whole year because there was a period there where he was out of the side for form reasons. But I think he would have played enough games to vote, or he should be voting higher than that. And Jaden Stevenson, similar, he was 23rd on 30 votes. Also a worry, similar to Dill Stevens. There was a big chunk of the year that he didn't play for form reasons. But those 2 are players that are, on some fairly handy money and should be contributing more than they are. And I guess that's, that speaks to where we're at and why we are on the position on the ladder that we are on, because we've got players like that just aren't able to play the role that we need them to play in order for us to take the next step up. There's plenty of others there that you could talk about. Bailey Scott had a really down year, finished in 14th after finishing on the podium for the last couple of years. George Wardlaw, I think we all wanted to take that next step. He finished in 16th and, had a good development year, but certainly not as exciting as potentially we might have thought based on his debut season. And given the amount of footy he was able to play, I would have liked to see him finish, a little higher than that. I mean, Nick Larkey finishing down in equal 11th is definitely someone who played every game. And, if we're playing well, he scores higher than that. He wasn't able to kick as many goals this year as he was last year. He was playing a lot higher up the ground, particularly in the first half of the year when the ball just wasn't getting down to him. So, not all his fault, but, a player of his skills and someone who was an All-Australian last year, you would hope that he's able to finish a little higher in the best and fairest. Great to see some young players, though, in the top half there. Paul Curtis, Tommy Powell, obviously Shees. Tristan Xerri's young in terms of games played. He's only playing his 50th this year. Charlie Comben kind of similar, very young in games played. And then Jackson Archer, obviously very young and inexperienced as well. So great to see some of those younger players finishing in the top half. But by the same token, a bit of an indictment on players like Scott or like Jai Simpkin, who was 15th. Zach Fisher is another one, traded in, finished 18th on 64 votes. And probably had the season that we should have expected that he would have. It wasn't awful by any stretch, but, again, when you come across from Carlton on a fairly nice contract, you'd hope to get a little bit more out of him, is what I might say. So, yeah, that's the gist of the Syd Barker. I just thought for one last chat about it, we might do a quick comparison to the North Podium, just in terms of how they finished up and some similarities and differences. I had a listener request. So we're going to compare the top 10s, essentially. So there's 7 players that feature in both. Sheezel, Xerri, LDU, Powell, Curtis, Zerha and Comben all appear in the top 10 of the Syd Barker and the North Podium. And in fact, that is the top 7 of the Syd Barker. So I guess it's more around talking about what are the differences. So the other 3 that finished in the top 10 for the Syd Barker, Aidan Corr, who finished equal 12th in the North Podium, Luke McDonald, who did not poll in the North Podium, and Jackson Archer, also equal 12th in the North Podium. So, Corr and Archer not far away. And Archer certainly, I think it's quite remarkable that 2 of them have finished that high, given they are defenders and, just by nature of the voting are never going to poll as high. Luke McDonald, the fact that he didn't poll at all is interesting in of itself. I can't remember a game where I nearly gave him a vote. There's certainly games where he would have been in, the top half of our players and probably quite a few games like that, but just doesn't stand out. And, I think that's part of the reason why he's been a bit of a whipping boy for North Melbourne fans the last couple of years, particularly the expectation that comes with being captain, I suppose, also, doesn't help with that. In terms of the top 10 finishers in the North Podium that didn't finish top 10, the Syd Barker. So Georgie Wardlaw, I mentioned him before, was 16th in the Syd Barker. Colby McKercher was 13th in the Syd Barker, and, can't complain about that finish for a first-year player. He was an excellent player and, missed some footy due to injury as well. So a great effort from him. Nick Larkey was equal 11th, and Jai Simpkin was 15th. And I mean, Simpkin's an interesting one. He finished in the top 10 in the North Podium based on 2 best on ground performances and then did not receive any other votes. So, that's where the way the voting works does impact the way that, the standings finish. Like, Simpkin didn't have a fantastic year, only polled in 2 games from my voting, but obviously was polling in more games for the Syd Barker, but only enough to be 15th. So to have your captain or your co-captain be down in 15th is a little disappointing, but there's definitely some reasons for that. I think, the concussions that hampered him at the start of the year after that Jimmy Webster hit in the preseason, I don't think helped. And then, trying to find that perfect role for him, he was playing a lot more forward line time in the first part of the year and then transitioned into more of a midfielder that then rested forward, which I think is a better role for him. It's just, what's going to work better for the team, I think, is probably more interesting. So, yeah, I just thought it was a bit interesting to see how different or similar they are. You can see there's a lot of similarities, which, you would expect, and I think we were all expecting that top 3 to finish the way it did, or certainly that those 3 would be the top 3. I did think that potentially Xerri might get up, but to see LDU win it, I think, is fantastic reward for effort for him. He just missed out in 2022, didn't play enough games last year to poll high enough, so a well-deserved award, and just makes the fact that he's coming out of contract at the end of next season even more nervous for us fans, because he's that one contract or that one player that we haven't got signed up long term. You do wonder if, now that the Syd Barker's done, there might be a couple of delistings announced soon, or if we're just going to wait until the trade period now. I'm not too sure. We know that we've got the 2 retirements in Greenwood and Liam Shields, and we know that Taron Thomas is coming off the list. So there's 3 that we don't really need to worry about. So potentially that's part of the reason why we haven't had any other delistings yet. But We know that list of uncontracted players. We know who's potentially at risk of being delisted, and some of them definitely will be. So we wait with bated breath to see when that comes, and whether it's in the next couple of days or if we're waiting for several weeks for trade period. The only other thing I guess worth talking about, there was obviously some other awards on the night as well. We had Colby McKercher Best Young Player, which makes total sense. Really, it's Zane Dersma that he's competing with, or Riley Hardiman, Will Dawson. None of those players really played enough consistent footy to really put up a fight there. So I think great reward for effort there. Shin Boner of the year was Tristan Xerri, and you absolutely can't knock that. It's great that he could win an award, and he plays such a Glenn Archer, Shin Boner, tough style of footy. So I think that absolutely makes sense. LDU won the Mazda Excellence Award, which is fan voted, so sort of like the fan best and fairest, if you want to see it that way. Best clubman Harry Sheezel, which again, he's just so well spoken, great bloke, so it makes total sense. Hugh Greenwood, with his retirement, took out the Peter Scanlon Community Award. He's done some great work for the Breast Cancer Network, so great to be acknowledged for that for Greenwood. And also, bit of news from him during the week, he's accepted a development coach role back up at the Gold Coast. So great that he's staying in footy. Shame he's going to have to pick up his family and move again, I assume. But I guess that's working in footy, isn't it? You've got to make your money where you can while you can. So yeah, great for Greenwood to be acknowledged with that. And then the VFL awards, best clubman was Louis Butler, and best and fairest Jack Watkins. He's won a few of them now, Jack Watkins. So yeah, that's what the awards on the night looked like. It's certainly not as entertaining to watch as the Brownlow Medal. There's a much larger breaks while they're having meals. I don't know if anyone was watching it, the live stream. The host, anytime they came back from a break or an eating break, had a really hard time shushing the crowd and getting the crowd to listen. And I have to imagine she was getting some stage directions to get the crowd to be quiet. As a teacher, I felt like I was back in the classroom. There's a lot of shushing going on. It was a little awkward to watch, but I have to imagine that was the stage direction she was given. I don't know what it was like in the room. It must have been super, super loud, because it took a long time for people to settle when it was time to settle. But yeah, just a bit of an interesting footnote there. It was a little interesting to watch, a little awkward at times, but yeah, great to have the awards out of the way. Great to see LDU crowned his first best and fairest, and hopefully it's the first of many, because like I said, hopefully we can lock him up to a contract as soon as possible. So let's turn our attention now to the AFLW game that was on Sunday afternoon. We'll go through it as normal. Team selection, we had a couple of ins and outs. O'Shea and O'Loughlin, case of the O's, were back in. O'Loughlin after her suspension, and O'Shea from a bit of an injury. Coming out, Lucy Burke and Neve Martin, who were the unlucky ones. Neither played super well last week, but I wouldn't say they were awful, but that's what playing in this North Melbourne side at the moment looks like. There's such a healthy competition for spots in the side. And that's exactly what we want as North Melbourne fans. O'Shea was quiet in this game, and was quiet in her first game as well. I'm not sure if she's a little bit hampered at the moment, or if she's just a little bit out of form. But O'Loughlin, getting her back was fantastic. We really missed her energy and her freneticness in the forward half last week. Came straight back in and had an impact. We'll talk about her in the game review. So yeah, it's great that we've got that competition for spots, and hopefully we do see a little bit of chopping and changing throughout the year, just to get some other players a bit of look at AFL footy. But yeah, getting those two back, and O'Loughlin in particular was positive. And I mean, coming up against Melbourne on their home deck at Casey Fields was, I think we were all expecting it was going to be pretty tough. We know that we dealt with Melbourne in the final series last year, but coming off the back of the Geelong game where we weren't in great form, there was a little bit of nervousness on my part, and as it turned out, there was really no need for that, because like I mentioned off the top, after that first quarter, we got that out of the way. It was a bit of a belting. So match result, Melbourne 21, North Melbourne 11-5, 71, so a 50-point win to North Melbourne. And yeah, after that first quarter, which albeit we probably should have been a little bit behind at quarter time, we got a little lucky. There was one moment where the Dees cut us up through the middle, which they did a couple of times in that first quarter. Kicked a long ball from sort of 45 out that looked like it was going to bounce through, and then it just popped up on the line, forcing the Melbourne player to grab it and try and get it quickly on their boot, but they weren't able to do so. And they had to grab it because we were chasing hard and would have punched it through for a rush behind in any case. So we were lucky not to concede an extra goal there, which would have had us behind at quarter time. So it was nice the ball was on our side, but after that it was 9-1 after quarter time. They didn't score a goal in the second or the third quarter, and then saw us run out 50-point winners, very comfortable. And it was the second quarter we did a lot of damage, kicked 4 goals to none, and then we really put the game to bed in the third quarter, and we were able to relax for the last part of the game, try a few different things, see what was working, and build up the percentage. That being said, I don't know the percentage is going to matter too much given we had the draw last week. I mean, look, who knows? Potentially we might be fighting out with Geelong later in the year for a spot, or there could be another draw. But anyway, you take the percentage and you take the big wins when you can, and a 50-point win against Melbourne at their home ground is nothing to be sneezed at. In terms of story for the game, I think we saw the best parts of our game and the best version of North Melbourne in that second, third and fourth quarters, particularly the second and the third. I thought we played through the middle of the ground. We bit off those kicks that opened up the ground. You saw us trying to play on at every opportunity and hand past those players running past. Riddell and Kearney were often being looked for as those hand passes on the way through. Riddell in particular has a great way of finding herself forward and running an angle such that she can kind of receive a hand pass and then not have to turn her vision too far, and she knows what's coming. Because sometimes those forward hand passes, the danger is that you don't know what's coming up the ground. You can get a little bit blindsided, but the angles that she runs allows her to receive a handball and then also be able to look up the ground. And she was great going inside 50 today. We'll talk about her in a little bit. But just our ball movement was quick. It allowed our forwards to have those one-on-one opportunities inside 50, and by and large we were pretty efficient going inside. Couple that with our frenetic pressure, it was just particularly in the forward half, we really pressured hard. There was periods there where we would just lock the ball in our sort of 60 or 70 metre zone from goal and not let it out until we'd scored a goal. 88 tackles we finished the game with, 22 of those were inside 50, and the Melbourne players felt it. We were corralling them. We were absolutely playing that kind of all-out attack through defence. And even at times when we were playing, when the Dees were trying to play it through the middle, except for that first quarter where they did torch us a couple of times, we were able to hold them up, and you would see us just running back in waves to fill the holes. And not allow Melbourne any space in their forward half. So, won the tackle count 88-74, and I think, by and large, we certainly had a really attacking game style that we were able to also, defend when we needed to. 5 stars. This is, going towards the North Podium. I was just talking about the men's version of this. This is the women's version. And 4-3-2-1 voting structure, just like, in fact, the North Melbourne coaches, but I'm only giving one player or one number of votes to each player. It was really hard to pick between the best 2 players. It was definitely Sheelaw and Riddell that were fighting out for those spots. And Riddell, I think, can consider herself very unlucky, but I just couldn't go past Kate Sheelaw's 5 goals for best on. 17 touches, 5 goals, 8 marks, 1 of them contested. And you kind of project, or you talk about what the equivalent of a woman's performance would look like in a men's game, just talking about the fact that there's more time in a men's game for more to happen. But for Sheelaw to kick 5 goals is a massive effort. Nearly half our score, we ended up with 11 goals, so she was a big part of that. Just got on the end of some great work further up the ground. In quarter 1, she was opportunistic, but then later on, I thought she played a really great lead-up and marking game. To finish with 5 is a monster effort. She also went back and took a mark or 2 in defence when required, when we just needed to shut the game down. So, a massive game from Kate Sheelaw. She's in really good goal-kicking form this year. And I think, last year Randall was doing a lot of the great work because Sheelaw was taking the best defender. It seems to me as though, and the commentators were talking about it as well in this game, that it's flipped a little bit, and now Sheelaw's getting some time and space and Randall's taking the best defender. So so long as we're kicking goals, I think the North Melbourne players and fans are happy because it means our structures are working. You don't really, at the end of the day, worry too much about who's kicking them so long as they're going through the big sticks, and they certainly were today. Ash Riddell, supremely unlucky not to get the 4 votes. 32 disposals, 2 goals, 10 tackles, 3 clearances, 7 inside 50s, 6 intercepts, nearly 500 metres gained. And just like she has been for the previous 2 games, was absolutely everywhere. To be honest, deserves the 4 votes, but I'm trying to keep myself accountable and only give one player each of the votes. Great going inside 50, lowered the eyes a couple of times, and like I mentioned, the way that she runs her angles allows her to see what's happening up the ground. Was involved in most of those running chains through the middle of the ground. And yeah, was relatively efficient. Still the odd errant disposal, but you're going to get that when she's playing, so many minutes inside and, plays that really good balance of inside-outside game. So yeah, unlucky not to get the full 4, but I just couldn't go past Sheerlaw's 5 goals. So Riddell 3. Then it opened up a little bit. There was a couple of options for the 2 and the 1. I've gone Emma Kearney for the 2. 19 disposals, 6 tackles, 4 inside 50s, 8 intercepts. And I thought, when the game was still alive, had some great run-off half-back, played her role really well with that intercepting game leading to launches off half-back. Also ran past several players and grabbed the hand pass or the handball receive and then launched us inside 50 several times. So yeah, I thought it was a typical Emma Kearney game. I just can't get enough of that pestering, grinning look on her face. You just love to play against her. She's got that competitiveness about her, but in a really nice, spirited way. She likes a bit of argy-bargy, doesn't take it too far. And yeah, just mopped up several issues across half-back. The one thing I would like to see her improve is that her quick hands out of contested situations often go straight to the opposition. We saw that last week in the Geelong game. She shot the hand pass out to a Geelong player who then kicked a goal that resulted in it being a draw. And in this game, similarly, she had a couple of quick hands out of contested positions that went straight to opposition players. So she just needs to work on that. I don't know if she's getting called on because the opposition players know her so well, or if she's just trying to get rid of the ball as fast as she can. But that's the only quirk in her game at the moment I'd like to see her sort out, because the rest of her offensive game and defensive game, to be honest, was fantastic. And then one vote, I've gone with Jazzy Garner. It was one of those ones where you look at the stats sheet afterwards and she has filled it. Probably not as impactful as she was in the first 2 games. 27 disposals, 4 marks, 6 tackles, 6 clearances, 7 inside 50s, and led the game for contested possessions with 18. But like I said, was down slightly on impact. Had a great tackle late inside 50, which led to a goal. And as usual, was a real beast in tight and punts the ball a long way when she does get onto it. Has a great kick. Probably not as influential and not as effective as she has been in previous weeks. So just the 1 vote, but it's that casual, it's a down game from Garner or Riddell is still a really good game. And I think that's part of what makes this North Melbourne outfit so hard to play, is because their worst is still a really high standard of footy, that the best players we've got. Mia King's one who was a little bit unlucky not to get in the votes this week again, but similar to last week, she butchered the ball a little bit. But again, it's like she's trying her best throughout the game. There's no issues with the effort, and she still has a really high level. So that's because we have so many players like that. That's a big part of the reason why we're able to be so successful. Other ones that were unlucky, O'Loughlin and Jenna Bruton kicked 2 goals each, so probably could have also featured in the voting on a different day. And Mia King, like I mentioned, her disposal are down a little bit, but an absolute tackling machine, and equally probably could have gotten the 1 vote instead of Garner. But I just thought Garner was a little bit more effective and didn't have as many of the clangers that Mia King did. In terms of the best opposition player, I thought Talia Gillard was a fantastic negating role. The stats aren't going to jump off the page. 5 disposals, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 4 intercepts. 8 1%ers, and a lot of those would have been spoils. She kept Talia Randall's impact to virtually none in the first 3 quarters. Did that mean that Sheerlaw was able to get off the chain? Yeah, it did a little bit. But Gillard did her role, and then in the 4th quarter went to the ruck, and immediately Randall took a mark inside 50, kicked a point. But you could see that she just had so much more time that once Gillard had gone off her. So yeah, I think she's probably had an unsung role potentially, but I thought that the role that she played on Randall was fantastic, and we had so many inside 50s that she had plenty to deal with. 45 inside 50s, and Randall wasn't able to score a goal for the day. So I think that speaks at least in part to the job that Gillard was able to do. I mean, Eliza McNamara would be the other one, had 21 disposals, 1 goal, 10 tackles, so was their most prolific ball winner and player through the middle part of the ground. But yeah, I think Gillard was fantastic in defence, and so either of those could be the best opposition player. What does the North Podium standings look like right now? I mean, Riddell moves ahead on 10 votes now in first place, Garner on 8, and Kate Shearlaw's best on ground performance gets her the 4 votes, and she's sitting in third. And then behind them, Kearney 3, Birch 2, O'Loughlin 2, and Randall 1. But certainly Riddell and Garner have been uber consistent in these first 3 games and deserve to be sitting on top. And I mean, I've said it a million times, Riddell easily could be on 12 because she certainly had a great case of best on ground in this game, and it was a coin toss between her and Garner last week as well. So that is what the 5 stars looks like right now. In terms of the negatives and positives from the game, I thought negatives, Bresnahan looked a little slow at times today, disposing of the footy. Got caught holding the ball or pushed off it a couple of times. She's usually a really reliable rebounding defender, but looked a little slow at times. I think I'll be watching her keenly over the next couple of weeks to see whether or not that's a trend or if she just had a bit of a down game. I thought last week and the week before she was pretty good, but yeah, just looked to me like she wasn't aware of her surroundings at times and got caught taking a little too long to dispose of it. So she's one that I'm looking for a lift from in future weeks. I think the fact that the Dees were able to score that goal in the last quarter, the fact that that's a negative is fantastic for us, and I'm going to point it out. But that goal came from Libby Birch having a tackle broken on her, and she got absolutely smashed with tackles twice in the third quarter. Her ex-teammates were really getting stuck into her pretty fairly with just some really strong tackling, and she did look a little bit worse for wear after that, so I'm not sure if that's the reason, but she did tackle the Dees player and have that broken, or a bit of a don't argue, which it wasn't great. She's still a watch for me with her mobility. She does look a little bit touch and go for me. I'm sure that she would say she's 100% fit, and I don't know what she looked like pre-injury, but she still really looks to be lacking mobility and agility for mine, which is a bit of a worry. Took a couple of good intercepts today, and played her role as best she could. But yeah, it was unlucky or unfortunate that we weren't able to completely shut the Dees out of the game in that last quarter and allowed them a goal. The only other negative, really, I'd just love to see a little bit more defensive cover around stoppages, particularly in that first quarter. We saw the Dees get out the front of stoppage a couple of times, and they just blew us away through the middle. Look, maybe we're gambling and taking the good with the bad, because obviously when we win it from stoppage, it's looking pretty bloody good for us. But yeah, in that first quarter and a couple of times in the second quarter, it did worry me a little bit with the way the Dees were able to break away from clearance situations and just gain meterage because we weren't necessarily covering the defensive side. Whether that's your wings or whether that's a defensive-minded midfielder like Mia King, I'd just like to see a little bit more accountability around those areas. And to be clear, we're nitpicking here because obviously a 50-point win, it's going to be mostly positives. But, if we can take something away, we know that in previous weeks we've had opposition midfielders really get a hold of us at times, and we didn't necessarily have that in this game. But I do think there's room for us to be a little bit more defensively minded at stoppage, so that when we don't necessarily get it, or if the ball's being sharked by the opposition, that we're at least able to counteract, because we just, for mine, are a little bit or a touch too aggressive at stoppage at the moment and prone to getting torched on the turnover or on losing the footy. But plenty of positives. I'm going to whip through them pretty quickly. I mentioned Randall earlier. I thought she was a bit of an unsung hero early in that first quarter. Had 2 really big contests where she just didn't allow Gillard to outmark her. She made a contest, got the ball to ground, and goals were kicked as a result of that. That's not necessarily the sort of thing that you notice right away, but the fact that she was able to make a contest, not get outmarked, allows us the opportunity to kick the goals. And that's something, if we think about the men's side, that a lot of the times we've been unable to do. We've allowed intercept marks and allowed the ball to just slingshot straight back out of our inside 50. That wasn't the case early in the game, and a big part of that was Talia Randall making a contest. I thought Taylor Gatt was great early. She had a really quiet game last week, and I thought she was bouncing back. She did fade as the game went on, but I thought, like I mentioned, she was really lively early, found the ball on the wing and was tackling hard. Only finished with 9 touches, 2 marks and 3 tackles. So, like I mentioned, she did quieten down, but I at least liked the response. I thought Tess Graven was a little better on the other wing as well. Amy Smith was reliable. She's always pretty... You kind of know what you're going to get from her. But, yeah, I thought those wingers played better than last week or improved from last week, even if they weren't absolutely lighting it up. I mean, let's be honest, when Ash Riddell's getting it 32 times, there's not a lot of opportunities for other players to get the footy. I thought Jenna Bruton was fantastic playing that mostly forward half role. It certainly seems to be suiting her. She's got some forward craft, so I'm certainly happy to play her mostly in that front half if that's what it's going to take to get her playing footy consistently again. Kicked 2 goals and great to see everyone get around her after she kicked her first one. I think viewers probably don't have an appreciation for what 12 months of rehab, or give or take 12 months of rehab, looks like. When you do an Achilles or a major joint like that, it can be a really tough slog to get back. So it was fantastic to see Jenna kicking some goals and finishing her work. We know last week she wasn't able to kick that goal, just missed it. So it was great that she was able to kick 2. And like I said, she's got some forward craft, so I think it's good that she's able to play in more than one position. We know we can play her in the midfield or on a wing, and half forward, she's looking pretty fantastic too. And then finally, I thought Bella Eddy, look, she wasn't able to get to the dangerous spots today. I think the last 2 games, she's been really good at finding those crumbing positions. But fortunately, O'Loughlin was coming back in, and she was crumbing beautifully. Finished with 2 goals, 1. And I think she's fast becoming one of my favourite players to watch. She's got that see ball, get ball attitude. She backs herself. One of her goals came from taking an advantage after a Jazzy Garner holding the ball decision went our way. And if she misses it, she looks a little silly and it comes across as selfish, but she didn't. She scored the goal. And I thought the way that she was attacking the front of contests and getting to that perfect front and centre position was fantastic. She's such an important player for our front half. We have to have those players to complement our tools. We know that Randall, Shierlaw, at times either King or Rennie are going to be down there creating contests, but we've got to have the likes of Bella Eddy and O'Loughlin and Bruton crumbing there ready to snap a goal at a moment's notice. So a really well-functioning forward line, much better than last week, but we know the conditions were a little bit more favourable, so you've got to weigh those things up, I suppose, in your mind. A look quickly ahead to next week. It's a Friday night game, or really it's a Friday twilight game, Friday the 20th September, 5:05 p.m. at Whitten Oval. Not too sure why we're playing at Whitten Oval and not at Arden Street. It might be because it's a Friday 5 p.m. thing. It might be thinking about traffic, or it could be more around ground availability. I'm not too sure. I don't profess to know, but I know the 5:05 time slot is to avoid crossing over with the AFL men's prelim, which will be Friday night. So, a great game against Port Adelaide coming up. They're sitting 11th on the ladder with 1 win from their 3 games. Conversely, we're sitting 3rd. Adelaide and St Kilda have won their first 3 games, so they're the only 2 sides ahead of us. Great to have a middling side to come up against in Port Adelaide. And like I said, it's a Friday just after work finishes. Should be a great game, and it's a bit of a curtain raiser, so to speak, for the AFL prelim later that night. And it does, I guess, there's a busy period coming up with another game for us on Wednesday the 25th and then on Sunday the 29th. So the AFL's fixturing a lot of AFL women's games in the school holidays and around AFL Grand Final week. It's a big build-up to that, so it's a really busy period. It's going to be interesting to see if there's a bit of management of players during this period. It kind of reminds me of the COVID years where we'd often have AFL games being played midweek in that 2020 year when we were trying to make up some time given how much of the season we'd lost. It's reminiscent of that with the amount of footy they're playing in the weeks leading up to the AFL Grand Final. So a busy time. We've got Port Adelaide to deal with on Friday, and then we'll go into the next couple of games, potentially with some management of players to do. That's going to wrap up this episode, though. We'll continue both the AFLW and the AFL men's coverage in the coming weeks. We're going to start looking at player reviews for the men's coverage, and we'll keep looking at game reviews for the AFL women's. So please keep listening in. I really appreciate all the listeners and all the support that I've gotten across the year. It's been fantastic. Yeah, I'm not quite sure when I'll speak to you next. It should probably be during the week, probably before that Friday game. I'll get a player review episode out. We're going to break it down into a couple of episodes this week, or this year rather. Yeah, I'll speak to you when I speak to you. And as always, go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.